I am so darn excited. As you can see, we've got a very special guest with us today. For 9 seasons, Judy Norton played Mary Ellen on the classic CBS television series, The Waltons. I've always been a huge fan of the show. It was part of my youth growing up. I just loved watching that show on Thursdays out here on Channel 5 in Salt Lake City. And uh, not too long ago, I did a video on Michael Lerner, and I think that might be the reason that when I log into YouTube, I started to get a whole bunch of Walton suggestions. And one of the suggestions that I kept seeing were videos by Judy Norton. And her videos are so engaging in all the right ways. She's super personal on the screen, no surprise there, and just a heck of a lot of fun. So with that, let me say welcome, Judy. It's great to be able to visit with you for a few minutes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So I've got to ask, who the heck, what happened? How did you get into YouTube?
Well, like a lot of people, when COVID hit and we all were shut in, I was supposed to be directing a film. So that's, on indefinite hold. So I started looking for other creative opportunities throughout my career. If I find something isn't happening down one path, I'll shift over and look at what I can do instead of, I spent enough time sitting around not doing things because I had to wait for someone else. As an actor, you're very low on the food chain in terms of being hired. Everything else has to happen before the actors are cast. So I felt like I was always, even if I was reaching out to people, it was very much, hi, do you have a job for me? And I hate that feeling. I would much rather be the one able to call somebody and say, hey, I want to hire you,
Oh, yeah.
So over the years, I have done a lot of different, I got involved in writing and directing and a little bit of producing, all along the lines of being able to have more control over my own destiny as an artist. So when COVID hit, I thought, well, I'll get more engaged in social media. I don't always have a lot of time for it, but for a short window of time there, I had extra time. So I started engaging more with social media. And along the way, did some checking into YouTube and came across Cami Kotler had a video up where she was talking about the first episode that was filmed, and particularly the opening credits and what she remembered about that. And I thought, well, oh gosh, I could certainly talk about what I remember about the Waltons. I called Cami up and I said, so what's the deal? What was the plan? Because she had a lot of views in a very short time. And I thought, well, clearly there's a lot of interest in this. And she was funny. I hope I'm not telling something out of turn, but she sort of said her daughter wanted to do some work with editing. She wanted to experiment with some editing skills. And so she talked her mom into letting her shoot this video and edit it. Yeah. So Cami tends to be much more engaged writing blogs more on her Facebook. She interacts with her fans more on Facebook and writes and tells stories. And I'm sort of less inclined to sit down and write a big long thing than to turn a camera on and go, I can just talk. Yeah. I don't have to, yes, I think about the things I say, but I don't then have to think about, did I phrase that right? And is the grammar correct? And all of those things that I think about when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I went, well, okay, maybe I'll experiment with this. I wanted to learn more about YouTube. So I thought I would start with something I knew and potentially transition later into other types of creative things that might also interest me, and thought, well, if I have people who are enjoying my channel, then maybe when I put different sorts of things up, they might be interested in that too. So it sort of started in that sense. So there's a long answer to a short question.
Love it. I love all the detail in that answer. And it's funny, I was actually watching some of your videos, and I think it might have been the one on the title. I don't expect you to remember this, but maybe you do because you did a video on it, The Changeling, where the ghost character. And yeah. I think Cami actually responded to you in the comments there. So it's very fun that you still have the interactions with your former castmates.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed that she commented when I was talking about the house and the interiors and the exteriors and where we shot them. And I mentioned Ike Godsey's store and how much we
Yes.
tended to love it when we were shooting in there, because they would stock the candy shelf.
Right.
And I guess it shouldn't have surprised me that I wasn't the only one who then would sneak in and raid the candy thing. And she commented that she would do that too. So then there were all kinds of a whole comment chain with, oh my goodness, Cammie's on. Oh, isn't this great?
Yes, that's, if I remember right, part of that conversation was that apparently there was no glass in the front of the thing, and so the candy was easily accessible as well.
Yeah, from front and back. I'm sure for reflection purposes,
Yeah.
they didn't want glass fronts.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
your channel's going like gangbusters. It's awesome. You do such a great job. You've got over 20,000 subscribers. I don't know how long you've been doing it, but it feels like in a relatively short period of time. And you've built a community, and that you see that in the comments, that all the people that engage with you. How have you done that? What has that been a conscious thing on your part?
Yes, parts of it. It kind of started with my other social media, particularly my Facebook fan page, where I would see the kinds of questions people were asking. And then at one point when I decided to start doing some of these behind the scenes of the Waltons videos, I asked that group on that page what sort of things they would like to know. And so then I got the idea after doing a few. I talked initially about things that I really remembered. Maybe sometimes it was just a particular scene that was shot and how we shot it that I thought was a bit of behind the scenes trivia and thought people might enjoy. And then because there were a lot of individual questions, not so much about just an episode, like, oh, please, I get those, just please talk about blah, blah episode. And then I started seeing all these questions, and then I would see them in the comments, because I do read the comments. And so I started earmarking things and thought, well, I'll just start answering some of these questions in individual segments, where in some cases it's questions that people routinely ask, and other times it might just be a question that I think is sort of interesting that someone asked, and grab that. So it's a bit random, and I haven't worried too much about whether an episode was the most popular or not. I'm not really gearing it off that. Sometimes it's just what strikes me at the time, or I notice somebody asked about something, so I'll go watch that episode again, because a lot of times I just don't remember the episodes. So off the top of my head, I'll think, well, I don't know. An interesting one happened because I've had a lot of people ask me about the episode The Pony Cart and working with Beulah Bondi.
Yeah.
And although I worked with her, I had very few scenes with her. So I didn't, aside from, an overview impression, I didn't have a lot of personal interaction with her. So those episodes will be up next week. I did the Pony Cart, and I also am talking about Eric Scott, who worked with her more in that episode, The Pony Cart. And I happened to be, Eric's birthday was last month. Mm-hmm. So I called him, and he and his wife and me and my husband ended up having like a little Zoom cocktail party and just chatting about things. And during that time I mentioned this thing, and he said, well, I was the one who really worked with her the most. And I went, oh, great. So I called him another day and went, tell me what you remember, and I had questions. So when that video airs next week, the week before Thanksgiving, I talk about, I spoke with Eric, and this is what Eric told me. This is what he shared with me.
That's awesome. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that what you're telling me is that you're engaging with your folks that watch the videos, you read the comments, you respond to them. And really good, something I do with my channel as well is that if someone mentions something that I think, oh, wait, that would be a great idea for a video, I do it. So, and you're right. It doesn't have to be the most popular thing, but it's the fun things.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that last week I did one about the vehicles, because I would periodically have people saying, what about the vehicles? You should talk about them. And I thought, well, I'll do this one. I'm not a car person, so I didn't have a lot of details. My son has been editing the videos for me. Mm-hmm. He's, in school, that's one of the areas he has been has been learning and doing more of himself. So he actually went and did more research about what were the models and what was going on. And he even discovered that there's an internet movie car database. So I know there's one for actors and, IMDb, but there's one for cars. So he looked up on there to see if he could just find out with some of them, what were they, what make, what model. The ones we couldn't get specific information on, he left blank. So he's been digging in, and that helped with that episode. And I thought, well, we'll throw this up. Maybe 5 people will watch it. It was hugely popular.
Yeah,
I was amazed and happy to see how engaged people were about the vehicles.
That's awesome. Well, I promised my channel subscribers that I'd ask you a few of their questions. And
Perfect.
So let me throw a few of them at you. I have to drop off at the bottom of the hour, sadly. So we'll give us about 10 minutes to get through as many of these as we can for them.
Okay, great.
All right. How did you get your start in the entertainment industry?
My parents got me started initially in some dance classes, some musical theater things, started doing some children's theater, then got an agent as a child and started doing commercials. And then it was really just that process of auditioning and getting some jobs, not getting others, and building from there until I was cast in The Homecoming, which, is the pilot for the Waltons, basically. Kind of launched
favorite movies.
Launched that. So
how old were you? Were you 12? 13?
I was 13 when we did The Homecoming.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. What do you think? Here's one of those tricky questions. What do you think happened to your character after the period of the life that's covered by the shows? And you had some reunion movies, so that helps a little bit. But what do you think happened to Mary Ellen?
Well, in the reunion movies, in the series, she decided she wanted to go back to college and become a doctor. So in the reunion movies, she is a doctor, and she actually delivered John Boy's twins. So if I had to project, I would say, yeah, she continued to help people and work as a doctor. She remarried. She had somehow these kids that seemed to come from nowhere, considering it said that I couldn't have any more children. And all of a sudden, my oldest, John Curtis, wasn't mentioned, but I had 2 other young children.
The magic of television.
Yeah, I know. A lot of artistic license taken there. And boy, do we hear about that. I had nothing to do with it. The cast did tell them, hey, there's some discrepancies with these children. And actors are kind of on a need to know and need to listen to basis.
Here's your page of the script. Just do it.
Exactly.
So did you ever have any regrets about your time being in the Waltons?
Not really, because it opened so many doors and launched my career. I would say there were some frustrating points right after the series ended, when my agents were getting a lot of response when they pitched me for things of too well known as for the Waltons. So some of that typecasting thing that does go on, I understand it. And so at moments I was frustrated by that. But I think that's where my path of saying, well, if this door is closed right now, where is there one that I can open? And I went back to theaters. I always wanted to do musical theater. I had been studying singing during the Waltons. So I started doing theater and musical theater, and that whole thing opened up. I went to Canada for 10 years and worked in film and television up there, and worked with a theater company as an artistic director, writing and directing. And so and then I probably, there were probably points where I got tired of people going, oh, I just know you as Mary Ellen. And I wanted to have people to recognize the larger body of my work. Right. So maybe there was a bit of that at times, but years ago I went, you know what? I'm so proud of the show. I'm so proud to have been a part of it. Its legacy is incredible. So I really consciously made friends with it and said, I'm going to embrace it and, quit feeling like I have to fight it in any way. Thank goodness it's not going away. So let's just make friends.
That YouTube channel is a perfect example of that. I mean, that's a big virtual hug for the show that you're doing. How about this question? Someone asked me to ask you if you ever took home a memento, something from the show, a prop.
No, I mean, it never really occurred to me
Mhm.
because they weren't mine.
Right.
They belong to the studio. They belong to, I think some of the actors maybe took things, I think they, they asked and took something. I don't think anybody just swiped anything. I ended up with the wedding ring that I wore, I think because sometimes I may have worn it home and, it was just in my purse and it would go. So I that was the only thing I ended up with. Um, and we also didn't know the show was over in the
Mm,
last episode.
yeah.
So we got word the show was canceled between seasons. So at that point, there was no, oh, this is our last episode, and what can I take?
Okay, makes total sense. What do you if there was a Waltons reboot now? Who would you like to see? Is there an actor out there who you would like to see play your character?
That's probably the toughest question. It's there's 2 points to it. One, it would be really hard for me to watch a reboot that I wasn't a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very protective
Yes.
and possessive of that character I spent 11 years plus reunion movie creating. So the thought of somebody else playing my part, I sometimes, even the thought that people are dubbing my voice in foreign languages, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, that's my performance someone's messing with. So I don't know, maybe it's selfish of me to feel that way, but I do. So from that standpoint, personally, I would rather not see a reboot. And if so, and then I'm not familiar, it would depend on the age range, because if
Yeah.
you're talking about rebooting from the beginning, then you're talking, what actresses am I familiar enough with who are in that sort of 13 to 14
Right.
year old range? And I just don't have the breadth of, off the top of my head, who those wonderful young actresses are that I think would have those characteristics that Mary Ellen
Well,
projected.
and you won't say it, but I will. No one could do it as well as you did. You did.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Do you think a show like The Waltons could be successful today as it was in the 70s?
I don't know that it would be like at the time the Waltons was on, where there was really only 3 major channels. So on any given Thursday, once the show found its audience and went from the bottom of the ratings to the top 5 and top 1, 2, 3 for years, we were carrying over 30% of an audience. Nowadays, shows just don't get those kinds of numbers for anything, even if they're hugely successful. There's just so much to choose from. So I think there is certainly an audience that is demanding that kind of programming, because I think it is an area that is very underrepresented in film and television today. So I think it is a case of, to quote A Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. If something really quality, good stories, good acting, the show holds up. When I watch the episodes again, I'm like, wow, for the most part, these episodes are beautifully put together. So I think if something of that quality was created again, it would find its audience. It's mostly these days a matter of it being known, people knowing where to find it, and it sticking around long enough, like the Waltons did, and initially, for people to find it. Because had we been given 3 or 4 episodes to find an audience, we would have been gone. And nowadays, that's what's expected. We did 26 episodes. We had 26 episodes to find our audience. Now you have 1 or 2.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
challenge
amazing
today.
how quickly shows get canceled these days, and,
Yeah.
there's just too much. I mean, it's one of those things where it's so awesome to have so much choice out there, but boy, oh boy, it's hard to find some of the good shows that are out there.
Yeah. Someone will mention some show that's been on for 6, 7 years that I've never heard of.
Me too. Yep, I've had that happen.
Yep.
All right. Last question that I have for you is around just, I know that you're incredibly close with your castmates that you worked with so many years ago, but how about some guest or semi-regulars? Are there a couple of actors there that you really enjoyed working with?
I feel like we were so lucky to work with some of the guest stars we worked with. I mean, someone like a John Ritter
Yeah.
that we got to work with for several seasons was just wonderful, not only as an actor, but as a person. We just had so much fun with him. And so there's people like that. Some of the guest stars we had before they were like Sissy Spacek,
Yeah.
before she was Sissy Spacek, Oscar winner, Jonathan Frakes, you know, just Ron Howard, just Jennifer Jason Leigh. We had incredible people come through there. So I wouldn't say that I've necessarily had the opportunity to stay really close with a lot of them, but boy, they sure were an honor to work with at the time. And then our whole supporting cast, the lovely actresses who played the Baldwin sisters and Ike and Corbett Godsey. And we still keep in touch with some of the younger people, Rachel Longacre, who played Amy. So because we have various different Walton get-togethers, where there's a museum in Virginia where there's a Walton museum, and then they built a John and Olivia's bed and breakfast that replicates the house. It's amazing. If you want to have a surreal experience, I talk about our shooting house not being real. This one's real. I mean, the cast came in for the opening weekend, and we were the first sort of public group to stay. It was like, for us, oh my gosh, we're back in the house. We're sitting in the living room again. We're sitting in the kitchen, but there's ceilings and there's walls and there's running water. So
you go up the stairs, there's rooms, right?
Exactly. And I stayed in, what had been John Boy's room and then became Mary Ellen's room after John Boy left. It was so weird to actually be in a real version of the house. So that's there. The museum's there. Earl Hamner's childhood home that he grew up at is right next door. So they've really created a bit of a tourist spot there. I would say those are things worth seeing awesome for people. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed, Judy, you dropped a new video on your channel today, a Q&A, very similar to what I'm doing. Although I think the questions are better over there. So I'm going to tell my channel subscribers, anybody watching this video right now, I'd encourage you to head on over there and watch that one. I'll put a link to that video as well as Judy's channel in the description section of this video. And Judy Norton, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. Such fun. Thank you. Thanks for sending people our way.
Got it.